We're standing here with the great chef, Sam Hazen. I've been coming to this event. You always do a fantastic job. What is your mindset when you do something like this?
Well, I'm the culinary director for B.R Guest, which is really a seafood-driven styled restaurants. And we're actually doing what we call bucket shrimp, and it's an Ecuadorian ceviche. And what's interesting about it is that the fact that it's something you find on the beach in Ecuador. And people go around with these buckets of shrimp and serve it on the beach. So what we did is we did a play on that. We flavored it with a lot of fresh tomato, a lot of fresh cilantro and chilies. Interesting, we puree some shrimp, add that to the flavoring as well, so it has a deep shrimp flavor. The other interesting part of the dish is what we do is we salt and sugar the shrimp, and by doing that, it brings moisture out. We strain that moisture, that becomes our sweetened salt for the dish.
Oh, interesting. Sounds delicious.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's great. It's absolutely great. So it's refreshing. It's beach. It's champagne. It's all the things that we need, for this event. So we were very happy with making it.
And you've come a long way. You've been at so many great restaurants, like Côte Basque. You were at Tavern on the Green at one point. You've come a long way from being called Chef McDonald in London.
So you did your homework.
I did my homework. I'm so interested in La Côte Basque. It's one of these stories that even like great writers like Truman Capote write about this restaurant.
Well, I'll tell you, it was my first job out of culinary. And when I graduated the culinary, I did a fellowship with an instructor. It's the same instructor that Charlie Palmer did his fellowship. I knew Charlie from Oriole. And what was interesting is, you want to be like Mike to play basketball. I wanted to be like Charlie. Yeah. So, once a month we would go to Chef Dannon's house and have dinner. And Charlie would show up every once in a while. So knowing he was working at La Côte Basque, I said, can I get a job there? So I finally went down and met Chef Jean-Jacques Rachu, who's a mentor. It was an incredible experience. I ended up working there for almost 6 years. And I call him every week, and one week he says to me, I'll come in tomorrow morning. Yeah. So I had nowhere to live in New York, went down, lived with my aunt in Brooklyn, got on the F train, wasn't even sure where I was going. I show up at the restaurant, the sous chef says to me, he says, who are you? Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. So anyway, I ended up staying there for 5 years. What was great about La Côte Basque was the fact that it turned out some incredible chefs. I worked with Todd English, I worked with Charlie, Rick Moonen, Ollie Barker, the first chef at Union Square Cafe, Bob Traynor, who was Asia to Cuba, Gary Coyle, Frank Crispo, who has Crispo's. So he was one of the only few French chefs that would allow American chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah, because I was going to say that there was at that certain point, this sense that French chefs were sort of elevated from American chef, at least in the 70s and
in the 80s. Well, it's interesting is in my time to try to get a job in New York City, I went to go see, and I chuckle about it with Chef Sayak now, who runs the French Culinary Institute. I said to Alan Sayak, I went into the restaurant, he wouldn't even talk to me. It was like he saw I was an American. He was a vampire and I was garlic, and it was really not a good experience. But going back to my career, I've been very, very lucky, and I've worked very, very hard and very, very long. After La Côte Basque and I worked at the Quilted Giraffe as well. Tavern on the Green, which is an incredible experience of volume. Working at Cascabel for Geraldine Ferrar's son, John Zaccaro, who's a dear friend of mine. And I'll tell you, one of the amazing things I did, I was very fortunate. I ran Tao Restaurant Group for almost 12 years. I opened Tao New York, Tao Las Vegas, the highest grossing restaurant in the country. Ran all their restaurants, did that whole situation. And then, Sam Hazen decides, let me go into a small restaurant, Veritas, which we had an incredible wine cellar. Got 3 stars. I got 3 stars New York Times, 1-star Michelin. And what really probably one of my toughest jobs in the world. And then now I'm the culinary director for B.R Guest, which is a great challenge. It's run by Starwood Capital now. They're trying to change up the style of the food, fresher, letting the chefs get more involved with the food instead of being dictated what to do. I have a great chef in Louis Jamil, who is from Blue Water Grill. We have Michael, who's at Strip House. It's been a great experience for me.
Yeah. And you mentioned Tavern on the Green. I have to get your thoughts on this rebirth that it's sort of had. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm going to tell you an interesting story. I did, the buyer at B.R Guest, Ron Reamer, who's an incredible buyer, going to retire soon. He was my buyer at Tavern, so we chuckle about that. Yeah. What was interesting was when Katie Sparks was having trouble there, she was the first chef back, they had called me to come in and as they wanted me to be the chef there again. So I went and I looked at the space, I spent a day in the kitchen. And it just, you know what, it was difficult for me to go into a situation like that. You never go back to where you've been, and I've been very, very fortunate to work for some great people like Warner, Mark Packer at Tao, Jean-Jacques Rochu, Barry Wine, Albert Roux. I can't forget Albert Roux at Le Gavroche, where I was called Chef McDonald. I was the second American to work there. That was an incredible experience. And then being at B.R. Guest is a great challenge for me too.
Yeah. And some of the criticism that has been for that restaurant has been that these owners were sort of green. You know, there were particular situations there. Jeremiah comes in, everybody freaks
Which
out.
was a shock to me, quite frankly. I mean, not a shock that I was shocked that they would bring somebody in who hadn't been doing it for a long time. You know, if you could do 10 covers, you could do 100 covers, you could do 1,000 covers. You think of, like I said, my progression of doing Tao, which did $65 million a year in business in Vegas, and then doing Veritas and getting a 3-star review in the New York Times. There was like, how does a guy do this? Cooking is cooking. You know, it's using good ingredients, proper technique, and having the right staff to believe in what you're doing to make it to what it is.
So what's next? I mean, we've been listening, we've been going through everything.
You know, listen, you know, again, I've had a great career, and you know, I talked to George Mendez. George, you know, it's interesting. George was a student of mine at the culinary, and he said, you know, it's funny, Chef. He said to me, he says, you know, he said, I was telling somebody about my experience at the CIA, and he said, one chef that kicked my butt was Chef Sam Hazen. What I did when I was teaching at the college, I taught, you know, I forgot to mention, I taught at the CIA for 3 years. You know, at the end of this whole thing, I'm going back there to teach because I want to get back to what I know. And George said to me, you know, it was amazing how you organized me. And one of the things I did was I would lock up the refrigerator, lock up the equipment cabinet, which really forced the guys to be incredibly organized. So I mean, what's next? I mean, I'm happy at B.R. Guest. I enjoy it. I'm in charge of a bunch of restaurants. I get the itch to want to be my own kitchen. You know, it's like I want to go back and do one more kitchen. So I have one more in me. I'm just waiting for it to happen.
Sam Hazen, thank you so much for coming and chatting.
Thank you very much.